They say guardian angels watch over us from the heavens, invisible and distant, guiding our steps through life's treacherous paths. But what if your guardian angel wasn't an angel at all? What if she walked among shadows, her heart beating with stolen blood, her hands stained with centuries of survival? What if the one who saved you again and again was the very thing that could destroy you with a single bite? This is the story of Eleanor Thorne and Daniel Reed. A story that spans 40 years. A story of mentorship, obsession, and a love that should never have existed. A story where salvation and damnation are separated by nothing more than a moment of weakness. My name is Eleanor, and I have been alive for 347 years. And for 40 of those years, I watched over one human being with an intensity that terrified even me. This is how it began. This is how it ended. And this is everything that happened in between. The night I first saw Daniel Reed, he was 7 years old, standing at the edge of the Morrison Bridge in Portland, Oregon, watching the dark water below with a curious stillness that made my ancient instincts flare to life. I had been hunting that night, not for food, but for something to fill the endless void that is immortal existence. 3 centuries of life had taught me that humans are fascinating creatures, chaotic and beautiful in their brevity. I collected their stories the way others collected coins or stamps. I watched them from the shadows, studied their patterns, their choices, their small rebellions against fate. But Daniel was different from the moment I saw him. He stood there in his worn-out sneakers and oversized jacket, a backpack dangling from one thin shoulder, and he wasn't crying. That's what struck me first. Children cry. It's what they do when they're lost or scared or hurt. But Daniel just stared at the water with those impossibly green eyes, calculating something I couldn't quite understand. I approached slowly, careful to make my footsteps audible so I wouldn't startle him. Even then, I knew how to seem human when I needed to. "It's late for someone your age to be out here alone," I said, keeping my voice gentle, maternal. I had perfected this persona over decades. The concerned adult, the helpful stranger, the invisible guardian. He turned to look at me and I saw it then, the thing that would bind me to him for 4 decades. Intelligence. Not just the ordinary cleverness of a bright child, but something deeper. A soul that was already old, already tired, already searching for meaning in a world that had given him none. "I'm not supposed to talk to strangers," he said, but there was no fear in his voice. Only exhaustion. "Smart rule," I replied, moving to stand beside him but maintaining a respectful distance. Though I'd argue that anyone who stands on a bridge at midnight is probably breaking a few rules themselves. He almost smiled. Almost. "My mom says I'm too serious. That I should act like a kid. And what does acting like a kid mean? Playing, laughing, not thinking so much." He kicked a pebble into the water below. "Not wondering what the point of everything is." 7 years old, and he was already asking the questions that haunted me through 3 centuries. I should have walked away then. I should have recognized the danger of this connection. But I didn't. "The point," I said carefully, "is whatever you decide to make it. That's what my teacher says. But what if I can't find anything worth making?" And there it was, the reason he stood on that bridge. Not suicidal intent, not yet, but the seed of it. The dangerous curiosity about endings that can bloom into action if left untended. I crouched down to his eye level. Something I'd learned made humans feel more comfortable, more heard. "Can I tell you a secret, Daniel?" His eyes widened slightly. "How do you know my name?" I gestured to his backpack, where his name was written in permanent marker across the fabric. A small lie, an easy explanation. In truth, I had heard his mother calling for him earlier, her voice shrill with alcohol and frustration, before he slipped out the window of their apartment. "Right," he said. "What's the secret? The point isn't something you find. Something you create piece by piece, day by day. Sometimes it's as small as a good meal or a beautiful sunset. Sometimes it's as big as saving someone's life or creating something that outlasts you. But it's always there, waiting to be noticed." He considered this with the seriousness of a much older soul. "Have you found your point?" The question struck me like a stake through the heart. Had I, in 300 years, had I found any meaning beyond survival? Beyond the endless cycle of hunting and feeding and hiding what I was? I'm still working on it, I admitted. That's what makes life interesting. The search. Life, he repeated, tasting the word. Then he looked back at the water. My mom says life is suffering. That we're all just waiting to die. Your mom is wrong, I said firmly. Life is complicated. It has suffering, yes, but it also has joy and beauty and surprise. It has moments that make the suffering worthwhile. He studied me for a long time, those green eyes seeming to look right through my carefully constructed human facade. You're weird, he finally said. I laughed, genuinely laughed, for the first time in months. I've been called worse. I should go home, he said, but he didn't move. Would you like me to walk you back? It's late, and your mother is probably worried. She's probably passed out, he said matter-of-factly. She won't even know I was gone. And there it was again, that ancient weariness in such a young voice. I made a decision then that would alter the course of both our lives, though I didn't know it yet. Then let me walk you back anyway. For my peace of mind. He shrugged, which I took as agreement. As we walked through the dark streets of Portland, I learned about his life in fragmented pieces. An absent father. An alcoholic mother who loved him in the broken way of the deeply damaged. A teacher who saw his potential but didn't know how to reach him. A loneliness that echoed my own. When we reached his apartment building, a run-down complex with flickering lights and the smell of stale cigarettes, he paused at the entrance. Thanks for walking me back, weird lady. Eleanor, I said. My name is Eleanor. Thanks, Eleanor. He hesitated, then added, what you said about life. About creating the point. I'm going to think about that. Good, I said. And Daniel, if you ever find yourself on that bridge again, looking at the water and wondering about endings, think about all the points you haven't created yet. All the days you haven't lived. All the surprises you haven't experienced. He nodded slowly, then disappeared into the building. I should have left then. I should have continued my wandering existence, collecting stories from a distance, never getting involved. But something about Daniel Reed had awakened something in me I thought had died centuries ago. A sense of purpose. I told myself I would check on him, just once, just to make sure he made it through whatever crisis had driven him to that bridge. But once became twice. Twice became a dozen times. And before I knew it, I had become his invisible guardian, his silent mentor, his secret protector. I didn't know then that this decision would torture me for decades, that it would blur every line I had carefully drawn between my nature and my humanity, that it would force me to confront the most terrifying question of all. How much can you love someone before that love becomes hunger? For the first 10 years of Daniel's life under my watch, I told myself I was simply observing, studying, following the same distant interest I had shown dozens of other humans over the centuries. But the truth was far more complicated. I became the shadow in his life that fixed what was broken. When his mother forgot to pay the electric bill and they were about to be shut off, an anonymous donation appeared. When he was being bullied by older kids at school, those same bullies mysteriously backed off after encountering a strange woman who gave them nightmares for weeks. When his mother's boyfriend raised a hand to strike him, that man left town the next day with no explanation, though his dreams were now haunted by visions of death. I never hurt them, not permanently, but I used what I was. The fear, the nightmares, the psychological pressure that a vampire can exert on the human mind, to protect Daniel from the worst of his circumstances. I watched him grow from a serious 7-year-old into an intense, brilliant teenager. He threw himself into books the way drowning people grab for life rafts, reading everything he could find about philosophy, science, art, history. He was searching for the same thing I had been searching for centuries, meaning in a world that seemed determined to provide none. And I guided him, always from the shadows. A teacher he admired received anonymous notes about his potential, leading to extra attention and opportunities. A scholarship application he didn't know he qualified for mysteriously appeared in his mailbox with all the information he needed. A college recruiter happened to attend his high school debate competition. I told myself I was doing what any mentor would do. But mentors don't break into their students' homes to watch them sleep, memorizing the peaceful expression they only wore when dreaming. Mentors don't follow them on dates, feeling a searing jealousy when another person makes them smile. Mentors don't steal worn t-shirts and old notebooks as treasures, keeping them like relics in a shrine dedicated to someone they've never officially met. The truth was, I was obsessed. By the time Daniel turned 17, I knew everything about him. His favorite books, Dostoevsky and Camus, naturally. The boy was drawn to existential darkness like a moth to flame. His fears, abandonment, meaninglessness, becoming like his mother. His dreams, to write, to create something that mattered, to escape the poverty and pain of his childhood. His habits. He drummed his fingers when thinking, bit his lower lip when concentrating, ran his hand through his hair when frustrated. I knew the sound of his laugh, rare and beautiful like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. I knew the cadence of his speech, the way his voice deepened when he was passionate about something. I knew the smell of his skin, soap and coffee, and something uniquely him that made my throat burn with hunger and something else, something more dangerous than physical need. I was in love with him. The realization came gradually, then all at once, like a cancer finally showing itself after years of silent growth. I was in love with a human boy I had watched grow up, whose life I had shaped from the shadows, who didn't even know I existed beyond one conversation on a bridge a decade ago. And the worst part, I didn't know if what I felt was love or possession, devotion or obsession, the protective instinct of a mentor or the consuming hunger of a predator who had spent too long watching her prey. The line between the two became thinner with every passing year. The night Daniel turned 17, I made a mistake. I let him see me. He was celebrating his birthday alone. His mother had forgotten again, lost in her own spiral of addiction, sitting in the same spot on the Morrison Bridge where we'd first met a decade ago. He'd returned to that place over the years, I knew. It had become his thinking spot, his sanctuary when the world became too much. I had always watched from a distance, but that night, seeing him alone on his birthday, the same loneliness I felt echoing in his posture, I couldn't stay away. "You came back," I said, stepping out of the shadows. He looked up, startled. Then recognition flashed in his eyes. Those green eyes that had haunted my dreams, my waking thoughts, my very existence for 10 years. "Eleanor." He stood up slowly, studying my face with an intensity that made my dead heart ache. You haven't aged at all." Panic flared through me. In my need to connect with him, I had forgotten the most basic rule of my existence. Humans notice when you don't change. I should have altered my appearance, should have stayed away, should have let him forget that conversation from his childhood. But I hadn't been able to. The thought of him forgetting me, of that one real interaction disappearing from his memory, had been unbearable. "Good genes," I said lightly, maintaining the human facade. "You'd be surprised how long the right skincare routine and genetics can maintain appearances." He didn't look convinced, but he was too polite to push. "I can't believe you remember me. I was just a kid." "You were memorable," I said truthfully. "How have you been, Daniel? You remember my name too." He smiled, that rare, beautiful expression that lit up his serious face. "I'm good. Better than good, actually. I got into Columbia. Full scholarship. I'm leaving Portland in 2 months." Pride swelled in my chest, sharp and fierce. I had guided him to this moment, shaped the opportunities that had led to this achievement. But the pride was mixed with something darker. The knowledge that he would be leaving, moving 3,000 miles away, beyond the easy reach of my protection. "That's incredible," I said. "You must be excited." "Terrified, mostly." He gestured to the space beside him on the bridge wall. "Do you want to sit? Or would that be weird, given I'm technically an adult now?" I sat, maintaining a careful distance between us. "What are you terrified of?" "Failing. Being ordinary. wasting the opportunity. He laughed self-deprecatingly. Also, I've never been on a plane before. Never been out of Oregon. Never been anywhere that wasn't here. And yet you're going anyway. That's brave. Or stupid. He looked out at the water, and I saw the same darkness in his eyes that had been there at 7 years old. Still searching. Still uncertain. Still weighted down by questions too heavy for someone so young. Can I tell you something? Yes. Another secret. Yes. The same one, actually. The point of life. It's not something you find in a place. It's not waiting for you in New York or anywhere else. It's something you carry with you, something you create wherever you go. You told me that before. When I was 7. He turned to look at me directly. I've thought about that conversation a lot over the years. Helped me in ways I can't really explain. When things got really bad with my mom, or when I felt like nothing mattered, I'd remember what you said. That I could create meaning. The weight of his gratitude, the knowledge that my words had anchored him during his darkest moments, was almost too much to bear. I wanted to tell him everything, that I had been watching over him, guiding him, protecting him for a decade. That he had become the center of my existence in ways that both saved and damned me. But I couldn't. The moment I revealed what I was, the moment he knew the truth, everything would change. The innocent gratitude in his eyes would turn to fear or fascination, and either one would destroy the fragile beauty of what existed between us. I'm glad I could help, I said instead. Even in such a small way. It wasn't small. His voice was intense now. Passionate in the way he got when something mattered deeply to him. You saved my life that night. I was seriously considering jumping. Not because I wanted to die, exactly, but because I couldn't see a reason to keep living. You gave me one. The revelation hit me like physical force. I had known he was contemplating the void, but not how close he had been to stepping into it. And my words, my one intervention, had pulled him back. I had saved him. And in doing so, he had saved me too. Given me a purpose, a reason to exist beyond the endless cycle of hunting and hiding. We talked for hours that night about his plans for college, his dreams of becoming a writer, his complicated feelings about leaving his mother despite her failures. I asked questions and offered gentle advice, playing the role of the wise stranger, the accidental mentor, the guardian angel who just happened to appear at the right moments. When the sky began to lighten, dangerously late for me, he stood up reluctantly. I should let you go. You probably have somewhere to be. Probably, I agreed, rising as well. The approaching dawn made my skin prickle with warning. Eleanor, he said as I turned to leave. Do you believe in fate? In things happening for a reason? I believe in choices, I said carefully. And in the power of connection. Why do you ask? Because meeting you twice 10 years apart, both times when I needed guidance, that feels like more than coincidence. He was too perceptive, too intelligent, too capable of seeing the patterns that I had tried to hide. I should have been more careful, should have known that a mind like his would connect dots that should have remained separate. Maybe, I said softly. Or maybe Portland is smaller than we think, and people cross paths more often than we realize. Maybe. But he didn't sound convinced. Good luck in New York, Daniel. Make something beautiful with your life. Create that meaning you've been searching for. Will I see you again? The question hung in the air between us, weighted with significance he couldn't possibly understand. What he was really asking was, will you disappear again? Will this connection vanish like morning mist? Perhaps, I said. The world is full of surprises. I left then, disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness before he could see how quickly I moved, how inhuman my grace was when I stopped pretending. But I knew the truth. I would see him again. I would follow him to New York, maintain my invisible guardianship, continue shaping his life from the shadows. Because I couldn't stop. Because he had become my addiction, my obsession, my reason for existing. 'Cause I loved him. And because that love was the most dangerous thing in both our worlds. Following Daniel to New York was both easier and harder than I expected. Easier because I had centuries of experience adapting to new places, creating new identities, blending into new societies. I became Eleanor Thorne, art consultant and independently wealthy eccentric, who rented a brownstone in the West Village and kept odd hours. Harder because New York was full of others like me. The city's darkness concealed countless predators, and I had to be careful not to draw attention from either the vampire covens that controlled territories or the hunters who stalked us through the urban jungle. But I managed. I always managed when Daniel was involved. I watched him flourish at Columbia. His natural brilliance, finally given proper resources and encouragement, bloomed into something extraordinary. He devoured literature and philosophy, wrote essays that impressed his professors, began working on a novel that poured out of him like blood from a wound. And I was there, always in the shadows. Not just protecting him from physical dangers, New York had plenty of those, but continuing to shape opportunities, open doors, create possibilities. A literary agent discovered his short story in a college magazine. An internship at a prestigious publishing house happened to have an opening just when he needed summer work. A rent-controlled apartment in a decent neighborhood became available exactly when his dorm contract ended. He never knew that every piece of good fortune had my fingerprints on it. That the agent was someone I had saved from a vampire attack years ago and who owed me a debt. That the internship came from a publisher whose company I had invested in under a false name. That the apartment belonged to a human who had been persuaded, through dreams and psychological pressure, to rent to Daniel at an impossibly low price. I was the invisible hand guiding his life, the hidden force removing obstacles and creating paths. And with every intervention, I fell deeper into the dangerous territory between protection and control. But I wasn't just watching from afar anymore. I started appearing in his life, carefully, sporadically, maintaining the illusion of coincidence. Chance meeting at a bookstore, another at a coffee shop. We'd talk for hours, discussing books and philosophy, art and meaning, his dreams and my carefully constructed fictional past. I became his friend, his confidant, the mysterious older woman who appeared in his life at random intervals and always seemed to understand him in ways no one else did. "You're like a ghost," he told me once, smiling over coffee at 2 a.m. in a diner near his apartment. He was 23 then, working on his second novel. His face lean and beautiful in the fluorescent light. "You appear and disappear. I never know when I'll see you next." "I travel a lot," I lied. The truth was, I was never more than a few blocks away, constantly orbiting his existence like a dark moon. "Where do you go?" "Wherever seems interesting. I've been around a long time. Seen a lot of the world." "You talk like you're ancient," he teased. "But you can't be much older than me." I smiled, not correcting him. Let him think I was in my late 20s or early 30s. Let him maintain the illusion of normalcy. "Age is a strange thing," I said instead. "Sometimes it's about years lived, sometimes about experiences accumulated." "You sound like my mentor," he said. The word hit me like a stake through the heart. Mentor. It's what I had been, what I had claimed to be, what I had hidden behind for 2 decades. But it was also a lie. Mentors don't feel the way I felt when he leaned closer, animated by passion for some idea. They don't memorize the exact shade of their students' eyes in different lights. They don't imagine in their darkest moments what it would be like to pull him close and, "Eleanor, you okay?" I realized I had fallen silent, lost in the dangerous spiral of my thoughts. "Fine. Just thinking about what you said. About mentorship." I met his eyes carefully. "What do you mean, I sound like your mentor?" "There was someone when I was young who guided me. I don't know if they realized it, but they saved me more than once. Anonymous help that appeared exactly when I needed it. I used to think I was crazy for believing someone was watching out for me, but..." He shrugged. "I like to think they were real. That someone cared enough to help." "I'm sure they were real," I said softly. "And I'm sure they cared very much." "Do you believe people can love someone from a distance, without ever really knowing them?" The question was so close to my reality that for a moment I couldn't breathe. Did he know? Had he somehow figured out that the anonymous guardian and Eleanor were the same person? I think, I said carefully, that love takes many forms. Some are conventional, some are not. Distance doesn't make it less real. But can it be real if it's one-sided? If the person being loved doesn't even know? That's not love, I said, and I believed it even as I condemned myself. That's obsession. He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. You're right. Real love requires connection, mutual recognition. Otherwise it's just projection, fantasy. His words cut deeper than he knew. Was that what I had been doing for 20 years? Projecting my needs onto him, creating a fantasy relationship that existed only in my mind. But no, he knew me now. We were friends. We connected, talked, shared ideas. This was real, wasn't it? Except he didn't know what I was. Didn't know the truth of my interventions. Didn't know that every good thing in his life had been orchestrated by someone who loved him in ways that terrified her. The friendship between us deepened over the next few years. I became a regular presence in his life, the eccentric older friend who appeared every few weeks with book recommendations and philosophical debates. He introduced me to his girlfriend, a smart, kind literature student named Rachel who made him happy in ways I never could. I hated her, not because she was bad for him but because she was good. She was normal, human, appropriate. She was everything I could never be. And still I smiled, congratulated him, gave them recommendations for restaurants and shows. I played the supportive friend while dying inside, watching the man I loved build a life with someone else. The night he proposed to Rachel, I stood outside their apartment, listening to their joy through the walls, and I wept for the first time in decades. The sound that came from my throat was inhuman, a keening wail of grief and loss that sent rats scurrying and pigeons fleeing. I had saved him, guided him, loved him for 2 decades, and he was going to marry someone else. Live a normal life. Grow old while I remained frozen in time. Eventually he would die, and I would continue, carrying the weight of this unrequited obsession into my endless future. I should have left then, should have disappeared from his life, let him build his happiness without my shadow falling over it. But I couldn't. The thought of not knowing if he was safe, not being there to protect him, was worse than the pain of watching him love someone else. So I stayed. I attended their wedding, brought an expensive gift, smiled through the ceremony. I remained the friend, the mentor, the guardian angel who asked for nothing in return. But at night, alone in my brownstone, I struggled with thoughts that grew darker with each passing year. How easy it would be to make Rachel disappear. An accident, a vampire attack, a tragedy that would free Daniel from his commitment. How simple it would be to reveal myself to him, to show him what I was, to offer him immortality at my side. How right it would feel to finally stop hiding, to claim what I had earned through 2 decades of devotion and sacrifice. These thoughts horrified me. They weren't the thoughts of a mentor or a guardian. They were the thoughts of a monster. And that's when I truly understood the danger I was in. Not just the danger to Daniel, but to myself. I was losing the battle between my humanity and my nature. The line between love and hunger was disappearing, and soon I wouldn't be able to tell the difference. The question wasn't if I would cross that line. It was when. 20 years of invisible guardianship. 20 years of secret love. 20 years of watching Daniel build a life that I could never truly be part of. And then, in one night, everything changed. Daniel was 40 years old, married to Rachel for 10 years, working as a moderately successful literary novelist. His life was good, not extraordinary but good. Stable, happy, normal. And he was dying. The diagnosis came suddenly. Aggressive brain tumor, inoperable, 6 months to live if he was lucky. I learned about it the way I learned everything about Daniel, by watching, listening, maintaining my invisible vigil. I heard him tell Rachel, saw him break down in ways he never had before, watched him confront the mortality he had been running from since he was 7 years old. And I realized, with horrifying clarity, that I could save him. Not with modern medicine, not with prayer or hope, but with my blood, with the curse and gift of vampirism. I could make him immortal, could give him centuries instead of months, could keep him with me forever, bound by blood and transformation. The temptation was overwhelming. For 20 years I had kept my distance, maintained the boundaries between us, respected his humanity. But now those boundaries seemed meaningless. He was going to die. Unless I acted, unless I claimed him, unless I finally allowed myself to take what I had wanted for decades. I struggled with the decision for weeks, torn between what he wanted and what I wanted, between respecting his choice to die human or forcing immortality upon him, between letting him go or keeping him forever. The nights were torture. I would stand outside his apartment, listening to him cry, hearing Rachel try to comfort him, feeling every moment of his pain as if it were my own. And the hunger grew, not just for blood but for him, for possession, for the final, irrevocable act that would make him mine. I told myself I was considering his wishes, that I would only intervene if he wanted it. But the truth was darker. I was looking for any excuse, any justification, any reason to finally cross the line I had walked for 2 decades. And then the opportunity came. One night, 2 months into his diagnosis, Daniel couldn't sleep. The tumor was causing pain now, headaches that medication could barely touch. He left his apartment at 2 a.m. and walked, not consciously I think, but drawn by memory, to the Morrison Bridge. The same place we had met 30 years ago. The same place he returned to when the weight of existence became too much. Followed, of course. Always followed. He stood at the edge, looking down at the water, and I saw in his posture the same contemplation of endings that had been there at 7 years old. But this time it wasn't philosophical. This time it was practical. He was considering speeding up the inevitable, taking control of his death before the tumor took control of him. I should have stayed hidden, should have let him work through this moment on his own, the way I had let him work through so many others. But I couldn't. Not this time. Not with him so close to ending everything I had fought for decades to preserve. "Daniel," I said, stepping out of the shadows. He turned, and for a moment didn't recognize me. The tumor was affecting his vision, his memory. But then clarity returned to his eyes. "Eleanor." He smiled sadly. "Of course it's you. You always appear when I'm on this bridge. Like some kind of guardian angel. Or a ghost," I said, echoing his words from years ago. "I'm dying," he said simply. No preamble, no gentle introduction. Just the brutal fact. "I know. Of course you do. You seem to know everything about me." There was no accusation in his voice, just weary acceptance. "Sometimes I wonder if you're even real. If I imagined you. A guardian angel I created to help me make sense of life." "I'm real," I said, moving to stand beside him. "And I've been watching over you longer than you know." He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the moment understanding flickered in his eyes. The pieces connecting. My unchanging appearance over 30 years, my uncanny knowledge of his life, my impossible appearances at exactly the right moments. "Who are you?" he asked. "What are you?" This was it. The moment I had avoided for 3 decades. The revelation that would change everything. Could have lied. Should have lied. But I was tired of the deception. Tired of the distance. Tired of pretending I was anything other than what I was. A monster who loved him. "I'm a vampire," I said simply. "I have been for 347 years. And I've been watching over you for 30 of those years. Since the night we first met on this bridge when you were 7 years old. You should have run. Should have been terrified. Should have rejected me immediately. Instead he laughed. A broken, desperate sound that was more sob than mirth. "Of course you are. Course. That explains everything. The agelessness. The impossible coincidences. The way you always knew exactly what I needed." He turned back to the water. "So my guardian angel is actually a monster. That's fitting somehow. Appropriate for my life." "I've never hurt you," I said. "Everything I've done has been to protect you, to help you. Without my consent. Without my knowledge. You've been manipulating my life for 30 years. The accusation stung because it was true. I had shaped his entire existence, removed his agency in ways I had justified as protection. I was no better than the vampires I despised, the ones who treated humans as toys, as possessions, as things to be controlled. Yes, I admitted. I have. And I'm sorry. But Daniel, I can save you. He looked at me again, and in his eyes I saw hope war with horror. You mean turn me? Make me like you? Yes, you don't have to die. I can give you centuries, millennia maybe. You could keep writing, keep creating, keep searching for meaning. You'd have all the time in the world. And what would it cost? Everything I wanted to say. Your humanity, your warmth, your place in the sunlight, your ability to grow old with Rachel, to have children, to experience the normal human life you've built. You'd have to feed on blood, I said instead. Human blood. And you'd have to leave your old life behind. Your wife, your friends, your identity. They can't know what you become. He was quiet for a long time, and I waited, barely breathing, for his decision. This was the moment. The choice that would determine our fate. Why? He finally asked. Why have you done all this? Why me? Because, I said, and my voice cracked with 3 decades of suppressed emotion. I love you. I have loved you since that first night on this bridge. I have watched you grow from a lost child into an incredible man, and I cannot bear the thought of losing you. I know it's selfish. I know it's wrong. But I'm asking you to choose to stay. Choose me. To let me save you. Silence. The water rushed below us. The city hummed around us. And Daniel stared at me with those green eyes that had haunted my existence for 30 years. That's not love, he said finally. That's obsession. You said it yourself years ago. Love requires mutual recognition, connection, choice. What you're describing is possession. His words were a mirror held up to my darkest self. And he was right. I had been lying to myself for decades, calling my obsession love, my control care, my stalking protection. You're right, I whispered. But does that change what I'm offering? You're dying, Daniel. In 4 months, maybe less, you'll be gone. I'm offering you a way to continue, to live. Isn't that worth it? At what cost? He repeated. You want me to abandon Rachel, to become a predator, to give up my humanity for an existence I never asked for. He turned away from me. Eleanor, I've spent my entire life searching for meaning, for a point to existence. And I found it in writing, in love, in the small moments that make life worth living. Those moments are human moments, mortal moments. They matter because they end. But you don't have to end, I said desperately. Not yet. Not like this. Everyone ends eventually. That's what makes us human. That's what makes our choices matter. I felt something inside me crack. 30 years of devotion, of sacrifice, of love. And he was choosing death, choosing to leave me, choosing mortality over eternity at my side. And that's when the darkness won. I wasn't asking your permission, I said, and my voice changed, became something ancient and terrible. I've kept you alive for 30 years, Daniel. I've shaped every good thing in your life. You owe me. And I'm collecting that debt. I moved faster than human eyes could follow, grabbing him before he could react. My fangs extended, and I pulled him close, ready to bite, ready to force the transformation, ready to make him mine forever whether he wanted it or not. But then I felt it. His heart racing against my chest, the warmth of his skin, the absolute terror in his body as he realized what I was about to do. He wasn't fighting. He had gone completely still, the way prey does when it knows escape is impossible. And I saw myself clearly for the first time in 30 years. Not a guardian angel, not a mentor, not even a tragic lover making a desperate choice. Monster, predator, a thing that had convinced itself that obsession was love and control was care. I released him and stepped back, horrified by what I had almost done. Go, I said, my voice breaking. Go home to Rachel. Live what life you have left. Forget about me. Eleanor. I'm sorry, I whispered. For all of it. for watching you without permission, for shaping your life, for loving you in ways that weren't love at all. You were right. It was obsession, possession, and you deserve better. I turned to leave, to disappear into the darkness, to finally let him go. Wait, he said. I stopped but didn't turn around. I couldn't bear to see the fear in his eyes, the disgust at what I had almost done. You saved me, he said quietly. That first night and so many nights after. Whatever your reasons, whatever you are, you kept me alive. You gave me chances I never would have had. You helped me find meaning when I was drowning. That doesn't excuse. No, it doesn't. But it matters. He paused. I'm not going to lie and say I'm not terrified right now. But I also understand something about you that maybe you don't understand about yourself. I turned to face him, confused. You're not a monster, he said. Or at least, you're not just a monster. Monsters don't spend 30 years protecting someone. They don't walk away when they could take everything they want. They don't cry when they hurt the people they claim to love. How do you know I'm crying? I asked, though tears were indeed streaming down my face, a vestige of my humanity that sometimes surfaced despite my undead nature. Because I know you. Maybe not as well as you know me, but I've learned to read you over the years. The eccentric friend who appeared in my life. The guardian angel from my childhood. The woman who just revealed she's been watching over me for 3 decades. He smiled sadly. You're the most complicated person I've ever known. And I think maybe that's because you're stuck between 2 worlds. Monster and human, predator and protector. That doesn't change the fact that I almost. But you didn't. That's what matters. You stopped. We stood there in silence, 2 broken people on a bridge, separated by mortality and immortality, by human and monster, by love and obsession. What happens now? Finally asked. I don't know, he admitted. I'm still dying. That hasn't changed. And I'm still choosing to die human, to spend what time I have left with Rachel. That hasn't changed either. The words hurt, but I understood. I had finally given him the truth and the choice, and he had made his decision. The only honorable thing I could do was respect it. But, he continued, I don't want you to disappear. Not completely. You've been part of my life for so long, even when I didn't know it. And I think maybe I can help you too. Help me. Find your own meaning, your own point. You've spent 30 years living through me, shaping my life, finding purpose in my existence. But what about yours? What's the point of Eleanor beyond protecting Daniel? The question struck me like a physical blow. What was my point? In 347 years, what had I created that was mine? What meaning had I found beyond this obsessive devotion to one human life? I don't know, I whispered. Then maybe that's what we figure out. In the time I have left. He took a tentative step closer. You said you love me. Real love, not obsession, means wanting the best for someone even when it's not what you want. Can you do that? Can you let me die on my own terms while still being part of my life? It would be torture. Watching him fade. Knowing I could save him with a single bite. Forcing myself to respect his choice even as it destroyed me. But it was also the only way to prove that what I felt was love and not just possession. Yes, I said. I can do that. And in exchange, I'll help you find your own meaning. Beyond me. So that when I'm gone, you have something to hold on to. A reason to keep existing. It was the most generous offer anyone had ever made me. Not immortality. Not eternal love. But help finding myself. Help becoming more than a monster obsessed with one human life. Okay, I agreed. But Daniel, I need you to understand something. The interventions stop. No more invisible hand. No more shaping opportunities. What happens in your life from this moment forward is entirely your choice. He nodded. Thank you. That means more than you know. The last 4 months of Daniel's life were the most painful and most beautiful of my entire existence. Kept my promise. No more interventions. No more guardian angel manipulations. I simply spent time with him as a friend, as someone who cared, as someone who was finally being honest about what she was. We met twice a week, always in public places during his good days, sometimes in his apartment when the tumor made it hard for him to leave. Rachel knew about me now. Not what I was, Daniel kept that secret, but that I was an old friend who had been important to him for many years. She was gracious about it. This dying man's wish to spend time with a mysterious woman from his past. Or maybe she understood that I posed no threat, that whatever existed between Daniel and me was complicated but not romantic in the conventional sense. During those meetings, we talked. Really talked in ways we never had before. Daniel told me about his regrets. Stories he never finished, trips he never took, words he never said to people who mattered. Not because he was seeking pity, but because he was processing his mortality, coming to terms with an ending he had always known would come but had hoped was further away. And I told him about my existence. The real one, not the carefully curated human facade I had maintained for centuries. I told him about my transformation in 1678, a young woman dying of plague in London who was turned by a vampire who found her beauty too precious to let fade. About my early years as a monster, when I killed without remorse, when I reveled in the power and the freedom from human mortality. I told him about the slow return of my humanity over centuries, the growing disgust with what I had become, the search for meaning in an immortal existence that seemed designed for meaninglessness. I told him about the others I had watched over the years, the humans who briefly captured my interest before fading back into the anonymous mass of humanity, and how he had been different, had become an obsession that nearly destroyed us both. "Why me?" he asked one night. We were in his apartment, Rachel asleep in the bedroom, and we were speaking in whispers over tea that he could barely drink anymore. "Of all the humans you've encountered, why did I become the one you couldn't let go?" "I've thought about that a lot," I admitted. "At first, I told myself it was because you were intelligent or lost or special in some objective way. But the truth is simpler and more selfish. You reminded me of myself. That 7-year-old on the bridge, asking what the point was. That was me centuries ago before I was turned. That was the question I've been asking my entire existence. And I think I believed if I could help you find your answer, maybe I'd find mine too." "And did you find your answer?" "No. But I'm starting to understand that maybe there isn't one answer. Maybe the point is the search itself. The connections we make. The way we choose to spend our time, whether that's decades or centuries." He smiled, though pain flickered across his face. The headaches were constant now. "That's very existentialist of you. Camus would be proud. You've been a good influence." "I've been a project," he corrected gently. "But maybe now we can be friends instead." And we were. For 4 months we were genuinely friends. Not guardian and ward. Not obsessed stalker and unknowing victim. Not even vampire and human. Just two beings trying to find meaning in a meaningless universe. One facing the end of his brief existence, the other facing the continuation of her eternal one. Daniel also kept his promise. He helped me think about my future beyond him. "What do you love?" he asked one night. Not who, what. What activities, what experiences, what parts of existence bring you joy? "I don't know," I admitted. "I've spent so long focused on survival and then on you that I've forgotten how to exist for myself." "Then try things. You have infinite time. Try art, try music, try travel, try helping people, really helping them, not controlling them. Try being part of the world instead of watching it from the shadows." "That sounds terrifying." "Good. That means it's worth doing." So I tried. During those 4 months, while spending time with Daniel, I also started living my own life. I took a painting class and discovered I had a talent for it. Centuries of observing humanity translating into capturing the human form on canvas. I volunteered at a homeless shelter, using my resources to help people without manipulating their entire lives. I went to concerts and museums and plays, experiencing art not as a distant observer but as a participant in human culture. It was strange, uncomfortable, but also liberating. For the first time in 300 years, I was creating my own meaning instead of stealing it from others. "You're different," Daniel observed one evening, about 3 months into his diagnosis. He was in a wheelchair now, the tumor affecting his motor control. Lighter somehow. I'm learning to be a person instead of a shadow, I said. Thank you for that. Thank you for letting me help. For letting me give something back after everything you've done for me. Daniel, I need to tell you something. I had been working up the courage for weeks. I'm going to leave New York. After you're gone. There are too many memories here. Too much of you in every street and building. I need to start fresh somewhere new. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Where will you go? I don't know yet. Maybe Europe. Maybe Asia. Somewhere I've never been. Where I can be someone I've never been before. That sounds perfect. He reached out and took my hand. The first time he had touched me voluntarily since learning what I was. Promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll keep trying. Keep creating meaning. Keep being more than a monster. And promise me you'll help people. Really help them, but on their terms, not yours. I promise. And one more thing. His grip tightened slightly. Don't make anyone else into what I was for you. Don't let anyone become an obsession. People deserve to live their own lives, make their own choices, even their own mistakes. I know. I promise that too. We sat in comfortable silence, vampire and dying human, former obsession and obsessed, two friends at the end of one life and the continuation of another. Daniel died on a Tuesday in March, surrounded by Rachel and close friends in a hospice room that overlooked the East River. I wasn't there. He had asked me not to be, knowing that watching him die would tempt me beyond my endurance, that I might try one last intervention despite my promises. But I was close, in the hospital parking lot, feeling the moment his heart stopped beating through some sense I didn't fully understand, the psychic connection that had formed between us over 30 years of devotion. The pain was unlike anything I had experienced in 3 centuries. Worse than my own death and transformation. Worse than all the losses and regrets of an immortal existence. Because this was the loss of someone who had become my entire reason for existing, and I had chosen to let him go. I screamed, and the sound shattered every window in the parking lot. Cars' alarms wailed. People ran. But I didn't care. For once, I didn't care about maintaining my humanity, my cover, my careful integration into human society. I had loved him. Obsessively, dangerously, wrongly at first, but genuinely by the end. And now he was gone, and I was still here, facing an eternity without him. I fled New York that night. Literally fled, running faster than any human could track, leaving behind the life I had built around Daniel Reed. I left money for Rachel. Anonymous, substantial, enough to ensure she never struggled financially. The least I could do for the woman who had shared him with me during those final months. I wandered for a year, moving through cities and countries like a ghost, barely feeding, barely existing. The world that had seemed so full of possibility during Daniel's final months now seemed empty and pointless. But gradually, painfully, I began to heal. I remembered my promises. Keep trying. To create meaning. To be more than a monster. I settled in Barcelona, a city I had never lived in before, where I could start fresh. I rented a studio and began painting in earnest, channeling 3 centuries of observation into art that people found haunting and beautiful. I volunteered at a community center, teaching English to immigrants, helping people adapt to new lives in a new country. And I did it without manipulation, without control, without trying to shape their entire existence. Just offering help when asked, support when needed. I made friends, actual friends, not projects. Other artists, writers, activists. People who knew me as Eleanor, the eccentric painter with unusual hours and a mysterious past, but who accepted me without needing to know every detail. And slowly, so slowly, I found a life that was mine. Not borrowed from someone else. Not lived through another person. But I never forgot Daniel. I kept a small painting I had done from memory. Him at 17 on the Morrison Bridge, standing at the edge of possibility, that serious face marked by intelligence and sadness and hope. I looked at it every day, a reminder of what I had been and what I had become. 10 years passed. Then 20. I learned to live without him, to create meaning without him, to be a person, or at least a person-shaped monster without him. But the question haunted me, especially during long nights when I was alone with my thoughts. Had I done the right thing? Letting him die, respecting his choice, allowing him his humanity even though I could have saved him? Or had I been a coward, too afraid of crossing my own moral line to save the person I loved most in all the world? I returned to Portland 40 years after Daniel's death. I don't know why exactly. Maybe nostalgia, maybe closure, maybe just the pull of memory bringing me back to where it all began. The Morrison Bridge was still there, though the city around it had changed dramatically. More glass and steel, fewer old brick buildings. Different people, different energy. But the bridge was the same, and the water below still rushed dark and cold. I stood in the spot where I had first met Daniel, where he had been 7 years old and contemplating the void, and I allowed myself to remember everything. The obsession, the love, the mistakes, the growth, pain, the beauty. And I realized something I had been too close to see during his lifetime. We had saved each other. He had given me purpose when I had none, forced me to confront what I was, and ultimately helped me become something better. And I had given him chances he never would have had, protection when he needed it, and friendship during his darkest time. It was complicated. It was problematic. It was morally ambiguous in ways that still made me uncomfortable. But it was also real, and it mattered, and it had changed both of us in fundamental ways. I would never know if I made the right choice. If I should have turned him, saved him, kept him with me forever. If respect for his autonomy was worth the cost of his death. If love meant letting go or holding on. The question had no answer. Maybe it wasn't supposed to. As I stood there, lost in memory, I noticed someone else approaching the bridge. A young person, maybe 16, with that same serious expression I had seen on Daniel's face so many years ago. That same weariness in someone far too young. That same dangerous curiosity about endings. They stood at the edge, looking down at the water. And I felt it again. That pull, that recognition, that dangerous desire to intervene. But I didn't move. I had learned my lesson about obsession, about control, about loving someone so much you destroy them trying to save them. So I watched, and waited, and stayed silent. The teenagers stood there for a long time. Then finally they stepped back from the edge, pulled out their phone and called someone. I heard fragments of conversation. I need help. I don't know what to do. Can you come get me? And relief flooded through me. They had made their own choice, found their own strength, saved themselves. But as they waited for their ride, I walked over, just close enough to be heard. It gets easier, I said quietly. Not always, not immediately. But it does get easier. And there are people who care, who want to help. You just have to let them. They looked at me with suspicious, guarded eyes. How do you know what I was thinking? Because I've been alive a long time, and I've seen that look before. On someone I cared about very much. I smiled gently. He taught me something important. The point of life isn't something you find, something you create. And sometimes just choosing to live another day is enough of a point on its own. That's actually kind of helpful, they admitted. Good. Now go home. Talk to whoever's coming to get you. Ask for help. Create your point piece by piece. They nodded and turned away, and I walked back into the shadows where I belonged. I didn't follow them, didn't learn their name, didn't begin another 40-year obsession, because I had finally learned the difference between caring and consuming, between love and possession, between being a guardian and being a monster. Daniel had taught me that. In his life and in his death. In his choice to remain human and his choice to help me find my own humanity. I walked away from the bridge, from the memory, from the temptation. And as I disappeared into the Portland night, I whispered to the darkness, "Thank you, Daniel, for everything. For the love and the pain and the lessons. For saving me while I was trying to save you. For teaching me that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go." The city hummed around me. Endless lives, endless stories, endless possibilities. And for the first time in 347 years, I wasn't watching from the shadows. I was living my own life, creating my own meaning, walking my own path. Still a monster, still a vampire, still complicated and morally ambiguous and haunted by centuries of mistakes. But also something more, something better, something almost human,